If you are considering moving to France to learn philosophy because, America costs too damn much and a lot of other countries do not take philosophy seriously, here is something that might help you. Hi, my name is Wani. Essentially, today I'll talk to you a bit about how it is that I take notes in uni at La Sorbonne, philosophy in French. This video is kind of going to be dissected into two parts. I have a little note list here of my quick tips, and then after that I would do a bit of a walkthrough of the notes that I took in 3 classes. So what I realized about taking notes is that it is very important to be able to place yourself when you're looking back at your notes, because your notes is not really for your person on the day. You're planning to save your ass in the future for when you have to study for your exam and you need to just find information. So the easier you can take the notes for yourself to understand in the future, that is literally your end goal for no other reason. It's not to share with your friends, but you can, but they won't understand it because you're coding it for your own brain. The main thing, again, sorry to be really repetitive, your goal is to, how do I make my life easier when I'm extremely stressed out in the future? One of the ways that you can do that is, for me, I put on my top left hand corner, maybe I can just show you an example, the one without like the name. I have the name of my professors on it, so you just gotta use your imagination. I'm a piece of paper. Oh wait, I could just use an actual piece of paper. Okay, piece of paper. Here you write the name of the class, the professor's name, and then you write the date. That helps you chronologically put things in place. I wouldn't say that I have a photographic memory, but I have this thing where it's like, when I remember a quote from a book, I would at least know where it is in the book. Middle, beginning, end, beginning, middle, end, or what side of the page, or top side of the page, bottom side of the page. I have that kind of spatial awareness of the things that I read. That being said, it is very helpful for me, at least, to be able to, once you put your professor's name, you kind of like, it starts triggering like, oh yeah, like this is how they say things. Like, you're putting in a lot of mental associations. I don't know if you've watched like things where they say like how to memorize better. You break your thing up into different sections and you pick one part of your house to keep repeating it, so that your brain can kind of spatialize and localize the idea, and with mental associations that it would help trigger ideas. But again, the main thing for me is that it is very important to be able to divide and section things in your brain, and I think it's a very good time for me to tell you how it is that sometimes it's so scary before going into an exam, because not only are you hoping that like the quotes come back, the authors come back, and all this stuff that you've like memorized and like read over and over again comes back correctly, because sometimes it's better not to quote if you're not even going to quote accurately. So there are a lot of times that I don't mention things because I'm not 100% sure on where it is in the book, because when you quote in the exam, you also have to quote, for the most part, besides the name of the author, you need to quote the book and you need to quote the sections, so that you don't just go Spinoza, ethics. It needs to be part 4, and if you're really, really great, you can be proposition 12, scoli, or démonstration 1, like, the first demonstration. It seems mundane to just do that, but it helps a lot in the long run, I feel. The other thing that I've learned to do, which I guess I can show you a second piece of paper, is that what I do here is like, you can see I fold my paper, and basically here is kind of my glossary list. So I'm skipping a bit forward because this is, something I'm supposed to do in the second part of the video, but it's just to give you a visual reference. I will highlight things that are, to me, important to come back to. And then on the side, like, I go like, okay, so we're progressing from this concept to this concept to this concept. And then this is kind of the explanation. If you take a screenshot and you try to like make sense of this, I don't know if you can, because one, this is a professor that is extremely hard to follow. Oh yeah, and see, this is like helpful as well. At the bottom, because, okay, sorry, I skipped a lot. I write my notes by hand. I know it's not the most efficient, but it actually is, because the main thing is that what you want to do in the class is just write key terms or key ideas that the professor mentions. It's not, you're not a machine, you're not a robot. There's really no point in getting like a verbatim thing, which a lot of students are really good at, not me. I also see no point in that, because then I just have to think to myself, oh shit, I have to go back and read like 14 pages for one class, or maybe 7 pages for one class, and I'm not going to do that. Because for me, what is most efficient is that you hear the key ideas that the professor is saying. You ask him before or after like class what it is that he means specifically. You know, for the most part, most professors would be good with telling you where you can read more on about it. And then you go to the library and then you take the book and then you get the notions and you get the full context and the full picture. So for me, I take notes by hand because one, it makes you extremely efficient because you're like, there is no possible way I can write as fast as this person speaks. So you pick up the most important elements. And the other thing that I do is that I have them on loose sheets of paper because for me, I like the freedom to just pull out something that I need whenever I need it and then be able to isolate certain ideas as well. And what I just do to help myself with that is that I have a numbering system at the bottom. So I have the title and everything, and then, you know, I have my pages numbered so that I am able to find them in the end. And then the next thing that I have on my list is don't write what you already know. So when I first moved to France, like I took this class which is FLE, and it was really, really great for me because it taught me how to write in short form. So I don't know if you ever see my notes because sometimes I flash them on screen. But essentially, there's a lot of words that ends with ION. So considération, définition. So instead of writing ION to be fast, you just do a circle at the top. Here it's like triangulation. I just write like ION just so that it's quicker and then you can move on to something else. So that is something that I would say, like short forms, but also how it is that you just don't want to write things that you already know. Because if you already know them, why do you have to write them down again? To reassure yourself? Like, no, you don't need that. The thing that I wanted to say as my notes about like recording lectures. So my professor on Hegel, I need the lectures and I need my friend's notes and I need photos of like the things that he draws on the board because it's kind of sporadic, his ideas, but you know, everyone has their own personality of teaching. If you have like, you know, a professor like, you know, for the most part, my professors on epistemology, they're pretty systematic. Like, you know, they'll say things that you can kind of predict where they're going, but then you just need to fill in the blanks. Those ones are easier and you can record it. But I think like when you have a recorded version, it's sometimes like worse because like, you know, I remember like when I first started, like someone actually was like, I can't come to class, so here's a recording. The classes are meant to be 3 hours. I spent about like 5 hours listening to this recording because I kept pausing because I knew that I had the capacity to stop and then rewrite. And this is why sometimes it's good to not type. You're just like writing by hand. But also the other thing that I want to say about, you know, if you're just starting out in terms of, you know, your French, because my French was only story time. Before, I actually lived extremely close to university, like extremely close to campus. And what happened was that, you know, I decided that it was a good idea for me to land at 7 a.m. in Paris, arrive at the apartment, and then take a shower or a 5-minute nap, and then go to school right after, which I did. So I arrived after a long-ass flight, and then I went to class, and I was listening to this professor, like, you know, talk about Plato's monde d'idées, like the world of ideas, and throwing Greek at us, and like, oh my god, like they usually give you this thing called example, which is basically all the quotes that they have. And this guy, he didn't even do like Socrates and like some other person. It was all in one paragraph, and like the next person who spoke was like highlighted, and I'm just like, absolutely no way. So I'm just gonna say my first year, for the most part, I relied on charitable souls to provide me with their notes, and then I would just look at their notes, because it was absolutely impossible for me to be able to understand anything. Yeah, how I got to this point, one of my letters of recommendation, my professor wrote that like, her perseverance shows that, and I was like, thank you. It definitely takes a lot of perseverance, because at that time I was, I think I learned French in 5 months. I was like, it was like one of those like things where I'm like, I'm gonna change my life. I learned French in 5 months, I did the exam, and then after that, you know, I didn't really use French because all I needed to do with French was to pass exams. And then I started uni in philosophy and French. For the most part, the only reason why, you know, when I do the walkthrough, the first year is going to be on methodology and not my other classes, is because like what I did was that I wrote my notes in class. There was no real system. It was just key ideas. I got my friend's notes, I compared my notes, and then I rewrote all my, you know, notes before I studied, because it also helps me with the French. I was like, imagine like learning French and philosophy at the same time, but that's what I did. So it helped me with the French, it helped me with the philosophy, it helped me understand things better. But that meant that my original notes, I just like crossed them off as I went through. and then I rewrote my notes. So that is essentially the basic idea of how I would suggest that you take notes. Have friends, make friends, help friends, you know, whatever you miss out on, they will have. I really, you know, like, it's so oversaid, like struggling with perfectionism, but yeah, you know, don't feel this need to have everything done and everything perfectly. Do not feel the need to understand anything from the get-go, because the whole point is that, you know, you're being introduced to 2 hours of something that you're not supposed to know, or is why you're taking this class. And I struggled a lot to just accept the fact that it's just like, I really have no idea what's going on. But again, grace to myself, it was in French. But I also learned a lot from French students or my friends who are just like, I have no idea what's happening, but I'm going to Google it later. Because I asked them and I was just like, do you know what's happening here? Do you know what they said? And they're as lost as you are for the most part. If you are, you know, in class right now in France and you're Anglophone and you're just like, why is everyone so calm when like I'm, you know, having this like crisis on the inside of like feeling extremely lost? For the most part, they have it too, but I also do feel that French people do not like showing, well, vulnerabilities. I think like my experience with Americans is that usually, you know, there is this openness to learn and like not really being that afraid to be like, I don't know, teach me. But I think like in France, it's much more reserved, like because there is a bit of prejudice when people see you a certain way, as in like you don't want to create this anticipation or this idea that you don't know stuff. But I'm not French, so for the most part, I just ask a lot of really random questions constantly, and I usually get really interesting answers as well. So it's a give and take, but yeah, don't feel like you're the only one who doesn't get anything, is what I'm trying to say about taking notes in class. So a little bit about the tour. Methodology is probably like the best thing to start off to talk to you about, which is like how it is that you analyze a question, right? Peut-on dire que la nature est bien faite? So can we say that nature is well made? So then with a question, you highlight the essential points. So I had peut-on, which is the right to pronounce something, nature as like the key concept, bien fait is like another key concept, bien is like, you know, good, and then fait is like, you know, completion, perfection. So there's this like, you know, professor that I had that was really good. Like from the very beginning, I was questioning from the very beginning I was questioning things like the bonsoir pour nous. I have it here actually, I remember it so well. There were two really marquant like moments that I was just like, oh, I'm pretty sure I remember this. One was when this professor was talking about Spinoza and how there were like 4 ways of connaissance, and it's a video that I'll probably make as well because I think it's very important and very pertinent. Essentially, there's this point where in the end you're just like, okay, you need like the true image of God. And I was like, okay, I literally did this. I was like, I closed my eyes and I was just like, okay, I'm imagining the true idea of God. Now what? And he like looked at me like just like kind of like, you know, the person that's teaching you is most probably a doctorate student who's just like, don't make my life difficult, but he can see the absurdity of certain things that we read in philosophy. And obviously like being my first year, I'm just like, well, what is this? So there was that moment. The second is again like pour soi and en soi. The funny thing is like, you know, because, you know, French obviously is not my first language. He started with en soi. En soi is in and of itself, and then pour nous is like for us. It's just a big categorization between like how it is that we can understand the thing in and of itself, and then there's the subjective side, which is pour nous, how we understand something. Subjectivity, objectivity. This is a very broad distinction, but just so that you get an idea. So with en soi, you know, it's the idea of like there are all these categories of how it is that we would be like, this is what we would say makes something as a way that we can understand it en soi, for itself, not for us, but for itself. And he like went through this whole thing, and then after that, he like started explaining pour nous, and I like looked at him and I was just like, it's me again, hi, me again. So, question, if the categories are made by our intellect, by us, of what en soi means, does that not mean that in the end it's for us? You know, like, because if it has to, you know, even if we go, this is the categories for us, this is the categories for in itself, and yet we are the ones who decide these categories, how can we say that in and of itself is not for us? And he's just like, we've moved on now for pour nous, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm catching up, but can you answer that? And then I didn't really know what he said, but there were multiple times that this professor just did things so that he can move the class along. But, you know, he's not there to fix the biggest philosophical problems, but just teach us how to argue. But, you know, I obviously was really there to argue. So this one, as I said, like, you know, it's just whatever it is that I could manage to write down. I also didn't have too much stress about writing everything down because I had a friend in this class who was really nice to give me his notes, which I didn't really use that much because he was one of those people who could actually write word for word everything. And yeah, I don't know, I just like didn't see the need because the professors could always explain things in their own way, but the thing that they're explaining is just introducing you to something that is within the work of philosophy. So you can go to a notions book if what is important to understand is nature. You can go to that book of notions that I've always mentioned. I think I have the photos somewhere here, whatever. And then just read through that, and then they'll give you like definitions. There's also this other book, which is very known to be the philosophical notions of philosophy, or you know, it gives you a bit of like what Descartes said or what's the understanding of it or whatever. But it's not here, but over there I have Le Petit Robert, which is like a dictionary in French. There's like a lot of different resources that you can go to understand the notions of certain things. So I wouldn't really restrain yourself or like break your back over like trying to understand things verbatim. And this is something that I will talk about in the next notes that I will be sharing. But essentially the idea is that, you know, just take down the key notes and then do your own proper research, which would make more sense to you in a context where you're not like flailing around being like, what is he saying? What's next? Because if they're doing their job, they're just telling you how it is that you're supposed to understand the history of something, whether it's a current in philosophy or whether it is a term in philosophy or philosopher, but it's not supposed to be their own pure subjective idea of it. They're supposed to give you multiple perspectives on this one idea, and that you can fill in on your own somewhere else. So now I'm moving on to my second class, which is La Littérature. I obviously like picked classes that have a big impact on me. So with La Littérature, I think that something to also take into account is that, you know, you want to understand who you're writing to in terms of the professor. If you have a professor like my professor on Bergson, who was very like, he, from the very first like contrôle de connaissance, like, you know, the short form questions, I could tell like he just wanted to see what he said written again. So for those classes, yes, like you probably have to take a bit more pains to like be more exact to exactly what it is that they said, but never take their class ever again. But the second one, which I obviously prefer and is actually scarier for more students, I feel, is the ones that don't really want to see or hear themselves again. Essentially, they don't want to be bored. They're going to give you like ideas and like pistes de réflexion, like, you know, ways for reflection, personal reflection. But, you know, it's just the starting point. You're supposed to actually like come up with your own stuff. So with this professor, like, he's extremely brilliant for this class. No one will tell you otherwise. And yeah, I don't really have much of a, you know, situation here where I can be like, oh, this is what I truly learned. I guess like I was better at like categorizing how it is that elements are different. Something that you will notice about my note taking is that like I'm extremely sparse and pictorial. So it's kind of like I take things like logically and schematically of like how it is that I take notes, and they're not like, you know, prose like where it's like continuous. Also, like I see, you know, things in mind maps or trees, or I see like how two ideas can be related to one idea, and I represent that out in my notes as well. There's like something that I always do, which is like, you know, the versus part, because in, you know, Occidental thinking, it's always about oppositions. But also like there's this thing that I really learned about French ways of arguing is that they usually always start with what something is not. So you see the cross here. So it's like, I don't have to say what it's not, but I can tell, like, you know, from my own notation, this is what it's not. And then with a tick sign, what it actually is. So besides opposition, there always seems to be this idea of like, we're going to say first exactly what I think you think it is, which is wrong. And then after that, we clarify. It's something that Sartre really does with his writing. And you're going to see like how people argue, you know, how like Heidegger is like repetition, like almost like a meditation, constantly. And then like, you know, again, like with Sartre, it's like he builds this giant argument and you're just like, you don't even want to stick to it because you know you have the habit or you have the experience of him constantly just cutting it down like afterwards. And then, you know, with Spinoza, it's like very rigorous, very structured, but then like, you know, he'll always have this moment of like beautiful insight into humanity. So that is what I want to say about that. Is there anything else? I think like something I also did is just like, you know, these things here, which is like I'll cross it off and I'm like found the Spinoza. But essentially like, you know, with this, it's really helpful to go like, okay, this is the end of the idea. But like I showed you at the beginning of the video, how it is that I have columns on the side, that makes it a lot more helpful as well. As you can tell, like for here, I don't have colors because I obviously like spent a lot more time like trying to make sure that I could write down as much as possible because obviously, you know, as you get more and more confident with your own library of information, you would be comfortable and okay with just, you know, not having to write everything down, but like, you know, to go back and highlight how it is that this is a point that you want to come back to. So that is, I guess, pretty much it for the middle part. Oh, this was really nice. It's just really simple. This professor is really good at doing oppositions and like, you know, you can also kind of get used to the specific professor. You can anticipate how it is that they're going to write their arguments. So then you know how much space to leave or like, you know that when he says this, the chances and the likeliness that he's going to put in opposition to make an explanation is high. So then you can do that. So that's how like I knew that like, you know, signifiers and signifiant and signifié is like going to be an opposition that I was making because like you could tell from my notes that had I thought that, you know, he's not the type of person to do that, I wouldn't have like done that, you know. It's just because like I was used to the way that he argues. And also like, you know, good professors would like give you an anticipation of how it is that they will argue, which is like, so there are 3 parts and then you wait for 1, 2, 3. And then you move on with your day. So just a fun tangent that I want to add on la littérature before moving on is that, you know how I said like, you know, there's some professors who are really good and they don't want to be bored, so they want you to do their own research. That basically also gives you the freedom to not have to take down everything that they say in class, right? So then what is really funny is that I just remember this so clearly. And I'm just going to say like, you know, there are different customs for each professor. Like some like do not come late, like you're dead. Some professors will never let you in class. Some professors would be understanding that, you know, if you have 3 classes, so like about 6 to 7 hours in a row, they will let you eat in class so that you don't die. But for the most part, this professor, everyone's like really like, oh, what is he saying? And everyone's like really like, you know, focused. But as soon as he mentioned Freud, I was like, whoa, like my chair. And then I got up and I left to the bathroom and I like took my time because I really don't give a fuck. These are all just my speculations, but the reason why I think like, you know, it's not wrong is because I did really well in his class. For my finals, I got a 17. And yeah, like I actually have a video on the dissertation that I wrote for it. So if you're interested, it's below. Also, if you want to learn about how it is that I prepare for my finals, I have another video. If you're interested in seeing how it is that I actually process each class and how it is that I prepared for each exam, La littérature is one of them that I prepared for, and I made this video before I got the grade. So you'll have my idea of how it is that I really focused, how it is that I attacked the exam, because I talk a bit about like the questions that were received and how it is that I brainstormed into answering those questions. So yeah, it's available for you there. And now let's move on to the next part of the video. So the last class that I would like to share, I mean, I have one on the theater, but I think I can just share with you, well, I guess I'll do both. So with theater, as I mentioned to you, at this point, like I've been pretty good with like, you know, my new notation system, which is I have a column on the side for glossaries where I'm just like, okay, I remember I really needed this term kind of from this class. And then, you know, I will come back to it and then I'm beginning to have the time to highlight. But also this professor was a good one where he would like repeat things in a way. I have like alienation and it's just like the definition of alienation. And, you know, I do think pictorially, so it's words, but like it's in a shape that I understand a bit more. Also, like, you know, sometimes like I highlight things in this way so that after class I can go to the professor and be like, what that? Like, I didn't understand. It's just making it easier for yourself to kind of segment ideas and events. So yeah, I have like a $sign as well here. And just because I wrote the $sign, it really like sparked in my brain. It's like, oh yeah, there's this thing that he said that when you pay for something, you consume something, and when you consume something, you have a different relationship to that thing. And because we're talking about art, then you can think about Iran, how it is that, like, you know, when you want to preserve something, you can't consume it, and that's what makes a piece of art compared to utile, something that you use, something that you just use once to satisfy something, and then it's consumed, it's destroyed, it's gone, compared to something that you preserve for its own thing and not for your own use, for your consumption. So yeah, this is why, like, you know, little things for yourself. Never think about your friends. I mean, look, if you want to help your friends in class, I would just be like, give them like, oh, I'm free during this day, and then I can explain to you how it is that I understand things, because it would be more helpful than literally just sending them my notes. For the most part, my friends don't ask for my notes anymore because they don't understand them. But that's because, like, the notes are for me, for my brain, and for how I understand things. Something that I thought was interesting to share was how I translated my notes into notes for partiel, like for the finals. This is how my notes look like. They're super small, but they're kind of like, you know, Cliff Notes-ish, but there are a lot of information. But these to me are my most precious notes, because here I have, like, you know, tome 2, so I know this is from aesthetics, chapitre 3, the third chapter, and then like EP plus D, so it's like epic, poetic, and dramatic. So it's like, you know, I remember them, and, you know, I have a quote that I need. Then I also have, like, you know, I segmented these things usually by terms, right? So here I have pathos, which is passion. And yeah, you can see, like, I have the term, I have the definition of the term, whether it like comes from the book or from, you know, a book that is really good at the library that gives you like the etymology from Latin and stuff, and Greek, and that's why, like, I'm learning Greek. And then I have, like, you know, what part of the book and then what quote from the book, and that's how I prepare for the exam. And yeah, so these are the most precious ones to me because they're the most dense and they're very, like, just what I need, and I know how to need them. But just to also show you something else, like, they come from me taking notes in class, taking notes from other books, and then when I do that, like, it's a larger framework. As I transfer them into my latest, most condensed notes, I cross them out to go, like, I've already written this down somewhere else. So that's usually, this gets thrown away, but I think it's because I didn't have the time to collect other ones as well, other quotes. This helps you, like, not reread everything all over again and try to find it all over again. So I already showed you a little bit of Hegel. What can I show you differently? So it's kind of like, you know, the professor would speak like a normal person. And then what you need to do is that if there's an idea here that actually links to this thing, just draw an arrow. Like, instead of like rewriting the whole phrase, and like the thing that I do is, like, I like showing like progression in thought, and this helps you where it's like you have an idea and then the professor wants to expand on it, but it's like a side thought or like just an explanation, but the through line is this. So then you have like this, and then you have like ideas that go the other way, or at least like that's how my brain functions and works with that. Okay, désir humain. Human desire. As you can see, I have this really fat highlight compared to this. I know it seems like so, like, not important, but fat highlight compared to skinny highlight has a difference for me. And also, like, you know, I have this, and then it's like, I don't even know how to really explain like why it is that I skip a little bit of space, but I just maybe feel like this part begins with this, and then it's the same logic between, like, you know, what it means to se soumettre. And a se soumettre to me is like self-negation. So it's kind of like, you know, you have this main phrase that you have to understand, but what does it mean when we want our object to submit itself? We mean that we want it to produce its own negation. So that is how I take notes. Also, you know, this professor is really great with, like, he himself, like, thinks really logically, so it's kind of like symbolically, and it's something that I picked up. Also, like, you know, if you want, like, make yourself happy, draw a little like death, just so that you understand the situation. Yeah, I think that's about it, really. And I'm sure it's going to develop over time how it is that I take notes, but so far this really works for me. And the last thing that I would show you is my notes for Hegel. This is also super precious to me, that's why it's in a bit of plastic. It's going to be a bit hard to see because it's on this blue paper, but essentially, like, I have the schematic structures for me to understand. I also try to do this thing where I limit certain ideas to a certain page so that I really, really boil down to what is the most essential idea. There's also like, you know, again, like schematic stuff. You know, these are little codes. So let's see if I fucking remember this. So CS is Certitude sensible, so it's sense certainty, and it is sinnliche Gewissheit. GA is general abstract, which is allgemeine abstract, which is general abstract, and then perception, which is Neemwaarung. I think it's Neemwaarung because the verb is wahrnehmen. Yeah. It's wahrnehmen. Okay, it's correct. I have it. So there's that, but then, you know, if I was to take like things for some other notes, it would be like this. So this is the notes that I took for Kojève, which is just citations and quotes. So yeah, I think it's just about being adaptive to what it is that is necessary and how it is that's the best way for you to understand it. And the last thing I would say is something that I said in the other video, is that you don't have to be super duper afraid of how it is that you will or won't remember something if you understand it. But of course, you know, we need prompts, or at least it's helpful to have prompts. So it's good to have notes like this so that in the future I don't have to restart from zero from all the work that I've already put in, but that I can just look at my notes and go like, oh yeah, this was what it was. But yeah, I hope this was helpful to you. I'll talk to you soon.